Wow, guys, if you are a Christian who doesn't normally watch horror movies, I want to urge you to at least consider watching The Deliverance on Netflix. Not because it's a good movie, which I think it is, but because I believe it's a valuable and important movie. Stick around and I'll explain why. I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. The IMDb synopsis for The Deliverance reads, an Indiana family discovers strange demonic occurrences that convince them and their community that the house is a portal to hell. Okay, that sounds very generic. The whole portal to hell thing, I'm like, I wasn't really getting that from the movie. I skip most supernatural exorcism type movies because they do the same sensationalized, Hollywoodified crap over and over with all the dumb, smoky, spiritual effects and stuff. But The Deliverance was clearly doing something different in the trailer that I saw, so I gave it a try. It is possibly the most realistic take on demonic oppression, and I say oppression, not possession, because I think there's all kinds of baggage with what that word means and what people mean by it and stuff. So I think oppression of demons is what this movie is dealing with. And I think it's probably the most realistic take that I've seen in a movie because it deals so much with a very common aspect of demonic oppression that other movies neglect, and that is sin. As I have talked with pastors, I'm a very skeptical person, by the way, in terms of supernatural stuff. I've not seen any kind of like demonic oppression in play in a really intense kind of moment myself. I go to a church that is not like superstitious, that's very grounded and very tries to be very reasonable in their thinking, which is all the more reason why I take note when one of the pastors that I have known personally for years, I know their temperament, I know that they're not, supernatural, they're not superstitious folks. So I know and pretty much trust, I do still have some skepticism, but I pretty much trust their description of their direct experiences. And so in talking to a couple pastors that fit the bill like that for me, there's very often unaddressed sin in the lives of those who are being oppressed by demons. Sin that has been allowed to saturate a person's thinking, just their outlook moment by moment with everything they experience, just so deeply pervading their life and festering in it and in their thoughts to the point of blinding them so they don't even see the connection between their torment that they're experiencing that they want deliverance from and the sin that they have allowed to infest their life and their thoughts and made it just an all too tempting playground for demons to oppress them through. This movie opens with some text on the screen that says, I need forgiveness for my sins, but I also need deliverance from the power of sin. And then that phrase goes away, and the next one that comes up says, I need forgiveness for what I have done, but I also need deliverance from what I am. Now, I don't know where those phrases came from, if they were originally written for this script, or if other people would know them from somewhere else. But the truth of these statements is really resonates with me, that we need deliverance from the power of sin in our lives that many times we have allowed to take root. We've given power to, that we need forgiveness for what we've done, but we also need deliverance from what we have become. And as Christians, we are children of God. We are given a new identity. But at the same time, we can be oppressed by sin. We can allow sin into our lives so much that it seems like it's such an integral part of who we are. And we need deliverance from that. And many times, what's needed is not like some Hollywood-style holy water splashing type of experience with a lot of chanting and stuff. I mean, the chanting part I don't think is really ever probably that necessary. But we need a legitimate personal encounter with Jesus where we are giving ourselves over to Him and trusting in Him to rescue us from the sin that is affecting our lives so much and that we are just giving ourselves over to. That's just the process of sanctification where, yes, the Lord wants us to be with Him forever, but He also wants to shape us to free us from the torment that sin brings into our lives. So the fact that that text was put at the front of the movie, I was like, oh, okay. That was like, I was like, you've really got my attention now. Anyway, the story. It's about the Jackson family. And that includes a single mom, Ebony, raising 3 kids while also caring for her sick mother. And it is a mess of a situation. Among the adults, there are no completely good characters. Even the Christian character that is instrumental in helping later in the movie says some things I disagree with. Probably not that the filmmaker and the writer would disagree with, but that I would disagree with. So in that way, I was like, sorry, I've got to go to lunch soon. In that way, I was like, there are no characters here that I completely agree with, that I don't find any kind of fault with in their actions or their thinking or something like that. It was just like, and I really appreciated that. I mean, throughout, there are characters speaking truth that badly needs to be heard by Ebony Jackson, but those same characters are sinful and even nasty themselves at times, which makes their truthful words hard to want to accept, or makes their help hard to want to accept, because there's some other things that come along with their help that are not helpful and that are a mess. You know, it's just like you see and can appreciate that some people, when they are in these really hard places in life, really hard circumstances, it's so hard to get out of them, because even the help that they would potentially be able to receive comes with its own mess, its own imperfection, that's just the result of human sin being present in all of our lives and affecting even those times when we want to do the right thing. And it's made all the more worse when we react to those bad things with just more sin ourselves, and we keep ourselves stuck in our mess. I mean, this is such welcome complexity for me, because this is how life is. We need to train ourselves to be discerning enough that we can accept truth even when it stumbles out of the mouth of a horrible person. Otherwise, there will be times when we continue down a harmful path, thinking we can justifiably blame everyone but ourselves, which Ebony does for much of this movie. The groundedness of the story also makes the evil more scary, because it all the more, because of how it's grounded and presented that way, all the more feels like something that could happen to you or to me or to someone that we know. I've heard little to no firsthand accounts, again, from people I personally trust and know not to be superstitious. I've heard little to no firsthand accounts of demonic oppression with the predictable Hollywood spectacle. I'm not saying that those things don't happen, that those accounts aren't real ever, but it seems to be the case that demonic oppression is often less sensational, which is why it can go unaddressed or be confused with mental health problems. It can even come alongside legitimate mental health problems that also need to be addressed. But when it's in the mix like that, man, it's really scary for how stealthy it makes that demonic oppression, that demonic influence. Most of the Deliverance deals with this kind of demonic oppression, the kind that blends into an already all too ordinary broken home. In fact, one of the movie's greatest strengths is how emotionally invested I became with these characters who are in tragically normal real-world experiences. And I'm just longing for them to see their sin, not as someone that's like wagging my finger and standing above them, but just like relating as like, yes, I can relate to that mess in a different way in my own life. And I want you to experience some of the freedom that I found. I want you to experience the forgiveness, just the lightness that comes from taking that to Jesus. This movie functions so well as a family drama, and that makes the supernatural horror all the more intense. Now, near the climax, things do ramp up and go into some more sensational Hollywood territory supernaturally. I was a little bit disappointed with that. And for a little bit, it felt like the pivot point at the climax would make the ending and solving deep human problems just feel too easy. But thankfully, there was a kind of another turn. I was like, okay, they retained the realism that I would really want in this kind of moment, and the ending felt ultimately to me both earned and satisfying. As far as cast, great cast. Andra Day delivers a varied performance as Ebony Jackson that had me angry at her for much of the movie, frustrated with her, but also feeling compassion for her. Glenn Close also brings the goods, which shouldn't have surprised me, as Ebony's mother. And she plays the complexity of a deeply flawed woman who came to Jesus late in life with some great nuance. I mean, she is the primary Christian that in Ebony's life, and she'll say some things now and then that I'm like, oh, that's good. Yeah, you should listen to that. But then she'll turn around and she still has so much sin at work in her own life that is doing so much damage, and certainly that did a lot of damage in the past before she came to faith. That it's just like, oh, it's understandable why the message would not be received coming from her. And I think that's Glenn Close, her performance, but also, needs to be credited to how the character's written, the moral complexity of that character. The child performers are all solid, I thought, for the most part, and not asked to do more than they are able. I'm pretty sure in it, maybe there's just some minor cases. But I'm really pretty happy there, too. Really a solid cast with no complaints. Okay, so let's talk briefly about the visuals. Most of the movie keeps supernatural events practical, shot practically in camera, very grounded, and it serves the movie very well. But in the climax, it opens up visually and dips into CG effects much more than I would want, which took me out of the experience a few times. Thankfully, by then, I was so invested in the characters and the story that it did not prevent a strong ending. It just hindered it a little from what it could have been. All right, themes. Anything of moral, philosophical, or spiritual significance going on in the themes of this thing that could trigger some worthwhile thought or conversation. There's so much. And Christians will disagree on some finer theological points presented as truth here because it seems to be written from a particular denominational perspective. But I would urge you to not give in to the temptation to let other people know in person or online how right you are about your theology and all the places this movie gets things wrong or goes down a particular denominational path. Because this movie upholds Jesus as the answer to sin, brokenness, and spiritual oppression more than any movie I've seen in this genre. There is a lot in this movie that many Christians will agree on, and we should really see as glass half full. Like, I can't believe this movie's being made, and it's being made well with this kind of ideology behind it. Was it made by a Christian? Probably, just based on my experience watching it. There is so much that could be talked about during and after watching this movie that would be an easy springboard for worthwhile, meaningful conversation that readily brings Jesus and the Bible into that conversation and that thought as well. But I didn't want to confirm the director's faith before watching and making my review. I didn't want that to color it necessarily. Probably what stood out to me, though, thematically most was the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, truth sometimes comes to us through seemingly the worst, most damaged, prideful, or hypocritical messengers available. It's our duty before God to never be that kind of messenger. But it's also our duty not to miss truth when it comes by that or any other delivery method. And that was, I think, a strong takeaway for me. All right, no idea what your tastes are in movies, but if I were a time traveler, I'd go back in time and say, Peter, watch it, buy it when it's available on Blu-ray, recommend it, invite people over to show it to them. This is not my favorite horror movie from a pure geek aesthetics perspective. I'm going to go for more Lovecraftian type stuff to scratch my geek horror itches. But The Deliverance is a very strong, intense, dramatic movie with characters I cared about, and so many worthwhile things to sort through that are coming from a biblical Christian perspective of at least one variety. So much there to be mined in thought, in conversation, if we're willing to do the work of discerning and talking graciously about that and those themes with others. Anyway, it's rated R for violent content, language throughout, and some sexual references. And those are all of my thoughts for now on The Deliverance. I'd love to get your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. Please like, share, subscribe, click that bell. I want to thank the Spirit Blade Insiders for making this review possible. You can get info about the benefits of joining over at patreon.com/Spirit Blade Productions. Then I hope you'll check out our podcast and stay connected to all CGC content over at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.